Africa finds itself at a political and economic crossroads. The essence of the goodwill achieved in the drafting of our new constitution in 1994 is being questioned by the rise of a dramatically altered vision for our economic future. These are the words of leading independent political analyst and futurist Daniel Silke, who now joins us from our Cape Town studios. A very warm welcome to you, Daniel.
Thanks, good to be with you.
Well, let's just get into that bold statement that you've made there and what you're seeing that would drive that sentiment.
Well, I think South Africa is at a crossroads. It is being buffeted now by a series of global trends. The major trend, of course, is the global difficulties surrounding the Eurozone. The role of technology, which will affect the workforce, which will affect every single aspect, for that matter, of labor relations going forward. South Africa's competitiveness globally, which of course is now analyzed on a daily basis by a plethora of international rating agencies and think tanks.
Daniel, just yes. What I'm asking you, though, is a statement that you made about the constitution that we have and what is going on right now. From what I'm understanding from the statements that you've been making is that there seems to be a disconnect between what people thought was going to happen and what we see unfolding in the country right now.
Well, I think in the country right now there is a heated political discourse that has raised the rhetoric levels to proportions which I think could be unsettling for many. There are question marks in South Africa now as the ruling political party, the ANC, becomes a little nervous about its political future, as its electoral support stagnates, as leadership tussles in the run-up to the very important Mangaung conference at the end of the year causes further internal strains, and given the fact that the ANC is such a powerful organization, it seems to be unable to pass legislation. It is being threatened by court actions. This all creates a very skittish and nervous political party. And as the political party is so powerful in the South African context, this affects every single aspect of South African life. It creates an unstable ruling party, a ruling party really that potentially can resort to shoring up its political power through a variety of means, through curbing the freedom of the press, through potential interference in the judicial system, for example. This is a manifestation of a ruling political party that is concerned.
With everything that you are seeing and everything that you've mentioned now, and you talked about the ANC being so powerful, do you see that power going forward being threatened in the sense that they might not have as much support going into the next elections?
It's not so much about electoral support, which on the one hand I think is showing signs of stagnation, so I think that's one area of concern. It's really on the ability of the ANC to exert its power in South African society. It is finding now that it's being challenged on many different levels, and perhaps most importantly from within its own ranks in terms of how the alliance is made up. And this in itself creates a destabilizing factor within the ruling party, and I believe when a liberation political party or post-liberation political party feels nervous about its cohesiveness, whether it's electoral or whether it's simply from internal differences, it becomes an unstable vehicle and it can resort to a variety of means to show up its power.
Daniel, I want to ask you if you see this particular government that's in power now, do you see this government taking on and tackling the most important issues? Job creation has been a really huge issue and it continues to be. I mean, you've said in some of the commentary that you've made that so much longer after 1994, we're still faced with probably even huger issues when it comes to job creation in the country. So in terms of that, what do you see unfolding in that space?
Well, I think we are seeing at the moment in government an introspection as to what to do about South Africa, but the introspection is divided into two camps. The populists who want a particular quick fix solution to South Africa's problems, versus, I believe, the established authority within South Africa, who themselves are extremely concerned and want a variety of measures that might be quite antithetical to the populists or, for that matter, to the trade unionists within the country. So without a doubt, if we take a look at Trevor Manuel's National Planning Commission and the National Development Program or report that's come out, I mean, this is a far-reaching document that really analyzes South Africa and states where South Africa should be in 2030, but its recommendations are certainly not going to find favor with the trade unions, with a variety of other alliance-related organizations. And I think we're going to see a political cleavage, a political dissension around proposals coming from within the ANC itself, not just from opposition parties or outside think tanks or economists for that matter.
Daniel, don't you think that that's perhaps one of the challenges that is faced, that the country faces, that the government faces? If you look at the youth wage subsidy, for instance, that we were talking about on the program earlier on, you have the ruling party, you've got the ANC, you've got the government saying this is something that they would like to happen, why they would like for the youth subsidy, for instance, to take place. Then you've got an alliance partner like Osata coming on board and saying they don't see benefit in it, and really strongly opposing that kind of move. Are these the kind of arguments, are these the kind of challenges that are holding the South African economy back?
Absolutely, and I think the youth wage issue is a perfect example of an issue on which the alliance is clearly divided. Parties have staked their particular views very, very clearly, and the major opposition party, of course, the Democratic Alliance, is exacerbating the internal conflict within the ANC. There's a second issue, of course, which is going to divide the alliance, and that is the political, the use of the political personalities within the bureaucracy in South Africa, known as cadre deployment. Again, the National Planning Commission has severely criticized political interference in the bureaucracy in South Africa, but this has been rejected by and large by many other elements of the ANC. They are going to pursue political linkages within South Africa's bureaucracy. And we're moving clearly to a position in South Africa where these critical issues that hold South Africa back are becoming debating points within the ruling alliance. And let me tell you, it's a necessary stage in terms of South Africa's economic development that we have this debate. It's a rough and tough debate, but we are at least starting to tackle these issues.
Daniel, do you see that debate, for instance, erupting into violence? And the reason I ask you this is if we look back at what happened with the service delivery protests, where people were saying exactly what you said in some of your commentary, is that this is a government that they believed was going to be able to give them housing, education, all of that infrastructure had not happened. We did see violence erupt because of that. We have seen in other states when it comes to unemployment and things that are facing the economy where there has been violence that's erupted and protests that have taken place. Is that something that you see happening in South Africa? Or are we are we in a place where more discussion happens and that we are in an economy and a country that talks more than resorts to things like protests?
Well, I think I'm pleased to say that the good news, in my opinion, on that particular issue is that whilst we do see service delivery protests in South Africa, they ebb and flow, they don't necessarily increase on an annual basis. I believe that we are fundamentally different to other countries around the world, particularly in North Africa, where there have been popular protests which have really unseated governments. We have a government in South Africa that is much closer to its people, but I believe that we have outlets for grievances in South African society that simply didn't exist in Egypt or in Tunisia or certainly in Libya or in Syria currently. We've got a very porous and open democracy in South Africa. We've got channels for grievances, a free press. And South Africans really discuss these issues all the time, quite different from what's happened in other parts of the world. And in addition, I would certainly argue that despite the fact that the South African government often misspent or misallocate funds to social spending within the country, money is spent on South Africans. And we know our budget in South Africa, social service, education, health services, it's spent on South Africans.
Daniel, with all of that,
it's not spent on propping up elites.
Daniel, with all of what you said, then, if the South Africa that you've described right now, where is the discontent from the people coming from then, if South Africa is really at the level that you are describing right now?
I think that we are maturing into a society where the population are starting to question whether the ruling political party is really an effective vehicle for delivery on the one hand, and also on good governance on the other hand. And there is a dissatisfaction, or perhaps a disconnect, between the heady post-liberation days in South Africa, where voting for the ruling party really was a given because the ANC brought South Africa liberation, to the current milieu in South Africa, where the realities of global issues, unemployment, poor governance, even corruption on a regular basis, scandals within South Africa are starting to make voters perhaps think twice. The issue in South Africa is that for the moment, the ruling political party still serves the people with just enough to keep that support. But I don't believe that South African voters are really going to continue to vote for the ruling party with great enthusiasm. They might vote today for the ruling party because there isn't any real other alternative, any viable alternative. For the moment, the ANC holds power. But I believe that as we go forward and address these issues, the ruling party is going to become more fragile. It is going to fray at the edges. It may not happen now in the next election, but I do see this debate becoming a lot more heated in our political framework within South Africa.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Daniel. That was independent political analyst and futurist Daniel Silke talking to us about South Africa's risk profile and critical decisions facing the country. We are going to go to a short break. When we return, we'll talk business cooperation between South Africa and India.